And finally, the scenes across the country were very different this year for St. Patrick's Day, with no parades or celebrations taking place as a result of the pandemic measures. That's all for now. Further updates in an hour. There now follows a national address by An Taoiseach, Leo Varadkar TD.
Good evening. Laila Podrick Honadiv. This is a St. Patrick's Day like no other. A day that none of us will ever forget. Today's children will tell their own children and grandchildren about the national holiday in 2020 that had no parties, no parades.
Hi, Granny.
But instead saw everyone.
Are you listening to the news at the moment?
Yeah, I have it on here
that will save
now.
us.
Do you think we'll be able to see each other?
The worst.
I don't really
Our
know,
best.
but I think we'll find out
Big
later.
demands of our healthcare staff
I'm gonna really miss
and
you.
big demands of every single one of us. I'll never forget that day, St. Patrick's Day last year, our national holiday, speaking to the nation and telling the Irish people of the extraordinary steps we'd have to take to stop the spread of the virus and keep our people safe. That night I said, in years to come, let them say of us that when things were at their worst, we were at our best. And now, a year later, I can confidently say that that was
And finally, the scenes across the country were very different this year for St. Patrick's Day, with no parades or celebrations taking place as a result of the pandemic measures. That's all for now. Further updates in an hour. There now follows a national address by An Taoiseach, Leo Varadkar TD.
Good evening. Laila Podrick Honadiv. This is a St. Patrick's Day like no other. A day that none of us will ever forget. Today's children will tell their own children and grandchildren about the national holiday in 2020 that had no parties, no parades.
Hi, Granny.
But instead saw
Are you
everyone.
listening to the news at the moment?
Yeah, I have it on here
that will save
now.
us.
Do you think we'll be able to see each other?
The worst.
I don't really
Our
know,
best.
but I think we'll find out
Big
later.
demands of our healthcare staff
I'm gonna really miss
and
you.
big demands of every single one of us. I'll never forget that day, St. Patrick's Day last year, our national holiday, speaking to the nation and telling the Irish people of the extraordinary steps we'd have to take to stop the spread of the virus and keep our people safe. That night I said, in years to come, let them say of us that when things were at their worst, we were at our best. And now, a year later, I can confidently say that that was the case. Whether it was maintaining a social distance, staying at home, reducing our social contacts, cancelling plans, or wearing a face covering, and now getting vaccinated, we all played our part, and now we can see the benefits. But of course, we should not forget the terrible price that so many of us paid, and why it was necessary to take these actions. We think about all the essential workers in healthcare, transport, supermarkets, food service, the Gardaí, the Defence Forces and volunteers, and all that they did to keep us going and to help save lives. I think of the more than 7,000 people who lost their lives in our island as a result of COVID. These were loved ones, individuals, family members, friends and colleagues, and many of us still mourn. But we're now on our way out of the pandemic. People are going back to work, businesses are reopening, our freedoms are being restored, and a sense of normality is returning. When the pandemic began, I knew that Ireland was in safe hands because of the strong Fine Gael team that we had in place. And now that team is going to make sure that we build a better future for Ireland post-pandemic.
We are going to use the pandemic as an opportunity to make real improvements to the quality of life and make Ireland even better to live, work and raise a family.
We will start by continuing the acceleration of the vaccine rollout. It's really picking up pace now, with over 50% of adults with at least one dose, and with people in their 30s next up. Every adult who wants to be vaccinated will be fully vaccinated by the end of September of this year.
Next, we will replace all the jobs lost in the pandemic. But we won't stop there. By 2024, we will have more than 2.5 million people employed.
We are extending the Employment Wage Subsidy Scheme and the COVID Restriction Support Scheme to the end of the year. Workers on the PUP will also have certainty, as we are extending that scheme until February next year.
We want to help get people back to work. We want to help people retrain and reskill. And as a part of that, we want to make sure we register 10,000 new apprentices every year in Ireland by 2025.
We're also rolling out high-speed broadband to every home, every school, every business, every farm, right across the country, no matter where you're located.
Can't hear you, Granny. You're on mute.
We're now investing more than ever before in our history in housing, but we have more to do. And shortly, the new Housing for All plan will show you how we intend to deliver 33,000 homes every year in Ireland.
Agus muid crochu tauchi níos Varadkar, tastínuing gomahoach gach chainteoir gaelga, chainteoirí dúchas, gus feilimóirí éan, go bhfuil siad á gomasú an gaelga a úsáid sa gnáthel, san anadaibre agus a phobal.
And as we build back better, it is vital that we do so in a sustainable and green manner. That's why we will cut our emissions by 51% by 2030 and become net zero by 2050.
With the Fine Gael team and our plan to reopen the country and get people back to work, I believe our economy will take off like a rocket in the months ahead. So let's look forward to brighter days ahead, to doing the things that we used to enjoy so much and maybe took for granted. Meeting our friends and family, going back to the office, sport, live music, returning to our hobbies. Better days are ahead for all of us.
Good evening, everyone. Jasave an shot an Ard Fheis in a gale. Tassulagam Gurwanshiv Tatnav as an Shachtan Guji Shaw. You're very welcome, everyone, to our discussion here this evening. My name is Siobhan Shovlin and I am a councillor in the Castleknock local electoral area in Dublin West. And we're looking forward to watching our party leader on Tánaiste Varadkar and our local TD in Dublin West right after this session. I'm going to introduce our four fantastic panellists here this evening. The title of our discussion is Learning the Lessons from COVID-19. We're joined by Deputy Leader and Minister Simon Coveney, Minister Paschal Donoghue, Minister Simon Harris, and Senator Regina Doherty. I'm sure watching that video brought back many memories to all of us of where we were when those announcements were made and the thoughts that were running through our heads of what lay ahead in terms of how we would be able to meet our loved ones across the country. I remember being in school that day because I also work as a primary school teacher, and little did we know the day that it was announced that we would be closing our schools, that we wouldn't reopen whatsoever, and we would have to adapt to completely different new teaching and learning methods. So I'm going to start with Minister Coveney, if that's okay. I suppose, Minister Coveney, at the time we were looking to the likes of yourselves and the other leaders in the country for reassurance and for the answers, and we were listening very eagerly to hear what the announcements were going to be. So I'd like you just to look back on your own recollections of those early days and early months of the pandemic and your own thoughts on what challenges would lay ahead for us.
Yeah, I remember it vividly, actually. And I remember St. Patrick's Day 2020 when Leo made that speech, which I think was a kind of a seminal moment in many ways on trying to galvanize support across the country for the extraordinary pressures that were about to be inflicted on the country as a whole. But I also remember 5 days earlier, because the Taoiseach was in Washington to meet the US president. And I remember getting a call from Simon Harris late at night to say, I'm getting an indication from our public health team that we're going to have to do something dramatic, and we're going to have to do it at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. And I was the Tánaiste at the time, so I was the highest ranking government minister, if you like. And I remember traveling across to the Department of Health, and there was a real sense of something of extraordinary significance was about to unfold. And we were there until 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning with the NEFID team, with Simon and his fantastic group of people in the Department of Health who were being asked to advise government on really the most significant of issues to save lives and to respond to this pandemic. And I remember the phone calls between Dublin and Washington that night, making decisions that the following morning we would effectively take the country into what many people referred to as lockdown. And ever since, the country has been galvanized in a way to try to save lives, to try to protect vulnerable people, where young people have been asked to do things and make sacrifices to protect their parents and their grandparents from this killer virus. Businesses were being asked to close. Who would have thought that when we asked pubs to close, they'd still be closed 400 days later? And this is, I think, an example of how Ireland can respond to the biggest of challenges in a way where people and government act together, where when politicians make decisions on the basis of science and expert advice and facts on the ground, people come with them and trust them to make decisions. When there is a sense of fear and anxiety and uncertainty and the unknown, which of course was what COVID was at the time, nobody really knew how COVID would behave as a virus. No one in the World Health Organization, nobody in public health teams. We were all making educated guesses in many ways, relying on as much information as we could get our hands on, looking at what other countries had experienced, particularly Italy and Spain, who really were being ravaged at the time by tragedy linked to COVID. And now it was our turn in Ireland to respond, to see and to test whether government with public systems could protect our people in the face of this extraordinary challenge. And it was, the most significant by far moment in my political lifetime. And I suspect the others who are on this call would say the same.
Yeah. Thanks, Minister. And you mentioned there about your close relationship and working with Minister Harris during those early stages. And I'm sure, Minister Harris, you would have been one of the first people who would have been alerted to the first confirmed COVID-19 case here in Ireland. As Minister for Health at the time, you would have been very aware of the possible challenges that lay ahead for us. There was talk of, a huge strain on our health system, oxygen, ventilators. We were watching around the world and seeing the devastation that this was causing in other countries. You might just give us an insight into your own recollection again of those early days and what you've seen as the huge challenges that lay ahead for us as a country.
Yeah, thanks, Siobhan. I mean, I must say, even watching that video and the image of the granny talking to the granddaughter and stuff, I must say, like many people, I'm sure I still find it a bit emotional, even watching back and remembering what that time was like just a year ago. I'll never forget Tony Houlihan telling me that 25 to 35,000 men and women in this country could die, and sadly, while nearly 5,000 people have died and over 7,000 on the island of Ireland, 25 to 35,000 people could have died. And those numbers I always remember. And I remember also being told, and thankfully this is no longer true, but that there was no vaccine for this virus. There was no real effective treatment. And that the only thing we could try to do to save lives was to change each other's behavior. And I'll always remember Tony telling me in my office in the Department of Health at the time, telling me that good communications during a pandemic can save lives. And that's really what we had to do. We had to try, and a virus that we really knew so little about and are still learning about, we had to try and think, how do we authentically communicate with the public and bring the people with us? And I think that speech that we all saw the clip of there from the Tánaiste was such an important moment in that as well. I too remember that night in March where Simon and I stayed up through the night in the department. And what I always remember from that night was the Department of Health it's all windows. It's fully windows right around it. And I remember when you look out the windows, you could see all the lights in the distance, right out to Sandymount and the lights past the Aviva Stadium. And I kept on thinking, and I still think, behind each of those lights was maybe a mum or dad tucking their child into bed, somebody, going to bed, getting ready to get up to go to work the next morning. And little did they know that we were having a conversation in the Department of Health that night that was going to change their lives for the foreseeable future. And I have to give huge credit to our health service, Siobhan, because our health service is often criticised, and health is always an issue of debate in our country, and that's a good thing. But I just will never forget the likes of Paul Reid being really part of the race to secure PPE for our people, and the efforts that they went to make sure that we could have personal protective equipment for our nurses and our doctors. I remember standing out in City West with Leo in what was effectively going to be our field hospital, where we'd normally be having our Ardèche actually, and standing in this massive hall that was meant to be full of beds of sick people. And thanks to the efforts of everybody on this call, all our members across the country, every citizen across this country, that never came to pass. So, well, when we look back at COVID, we will learn lessons, and we'll learn lessons for the next pandemic. I think it's also important that we look back with a sense of pride at the job that our health service leaders did in steering us through a really, really, really difficult time. And now look where we are a year on. We've still a way to go, but there is a real tangible, sustainable hope in the air at last.
Yeah, absolutely. And you spoke there about the importance of communicating during the pandemic. And I know that's something which you really worked very hard on, and communicating and showing your own personal insights into the experience, which was valued by so many people. And you spoke about how far we've come. It's hard to believe at this stage now that the younger cohorts, I'm saying that because maybe I'm in that cohort myself, are starting to register for the vaccine. So it's really interesting to see how far we've come. We're going to move on now to just speak a little bit about the economy, and I'm going to be speaking with Minister Donoghue and Senator Doherty on this. Fine Gael had to act very fast in putting in place supports for businesses and those who would be worst impacted by the pandemic. And I know even from my role as a councillor, those supports are evident in our local council in terms of, grants for outdoor dining and outdoor seating, and, local businesses in my own area used grants to set up apps and websites and so on. So from your own perspective and, working towards the employment wage subsidy scheme and the CRSS and the pandemic unemployment support, as we build our economy back up and support people as they return to work, how can we shape a better future for people? I'll go to yourself, Minister Donoghue, first of all.
Well, the first way in which we will shape a better future, and we will do that, is by getting our country back to work, getting all of our citizens who are currently on the pandemic unemployment payment, getting them back in good full-time employment, and helping our employers do that. And that's what we have done by the continuation of the employment wage subsidy scheme up to the end of this year, by changing some of our big support programs so that as employers reopen, they get a big injection of income to help with reopening. And then also by extending the pandemic unemployment payment, because we accept that for some parts of our economy, the pace of reopening will be slower because we still have to have some public health restrictions in place. And like Simon there just touched on there a moment ago, I mean, I can vividly remember those days when we created a wage subsidy scheme. I can remember the exact meeting where I was sitting with Regina, where we realised we would need to design something like the pandemic unemployment payment, and we would need to design a new level of income for the pandemic unemployment payment. Those days will stay with me forever. And to be here now, 14, 15, 16 months later, and we're talking about how we can get people off those schemes because of all of the efforts we've made with the disease. It's just the most remarkable journey. But as is the case in life and in politics, we have to look to the next part of the journey. And that next part of the journey is getting our country reopened safely, getting employers open again, and looking forward to a bright and very different future, which is where all of our efforts are focused at the moment.
Thanks for that. And we did have to act very fast in those initial stages, and probably didn't realise that the supports would be needed on a much longer term basis. Senator Doherty, you've spoken a lot about the aviation industry, and I know it's something that you're passionate about as we, I suppose, begin to support the aviation industry. What more must we do, in your opinion?
I think, first of all, it's really important to recognise the speed at which the state responded, because, you know, as all of the people on this call know, things don't happen very fast normally, you know, when you're introducing policies. And we went from the 9th of March, when we introduced the enhanced illness benefit for people who, you know, according to the modelling numbers that Simon would have given us, were going to be in their tens of thousands, and they needed an income replacement to ensure that they didn't go to work and put themselves and others at risk, to literally within a week later, the Taoiseach was then closing down the country. And Pascal is right. We had to sit around, you know, in the Department of Finance late one Friday evening and try and say, how are we going to stop hundreds of thousands of people arriving in our Intrio services centres and queuing beside each other when they shouldn't be beside each other? And it genuinely is miraculous that we got a PUP payment up online, and is huge testament to the staff that work both in the Department of Finance and particularly in the Department of Social Protection. And I have to say that because they were magnificent, and they went, you know, to the nth degree to make sure that the people that we serve, our citizens of Ireland, had an income to replace the one that they would normally earn themselves, because the amount of liberties and freedoms that were taken from people when we had to lock down, we needed to make sure that we had social cohesion amongst the Irish citizens' body. And the best way for us to do that was to make sure that they weren't worrying about money to put food on the table or to pay their bills. And that was hugely impactful. And I think the PUP, the EWSS, the TWSS before that, those income supports played a huge role. And I think now when you look back, that night we kind of devised that programme for 12 weeks. And I never in my worst nightmare would have thought that 12 months later we would still be here. And Pascal is right. There are industries that will still continue to need support for many months into the future. And we will be there for them. So to give them the reassurances that we will be there for them. And secondary to the income supports in my department, we had to look at policies for people that would have been hugely impactful because of the lockdown, and women and men that suffer from domestic and sexual violence and how they access services from the state needed to be radically overhauled within a matter of days. And we had to put in emergency measures so that women and men fleeing from violent situations could get access to temporary accommodation in a different way than what would normally have happened. And again, the state responded literally, you know, within days, which is not normal. But then I suppose what we've lived through for the last 14 months is not normal. But you're right, Siobhan, we need to learn, because I think what the last 12 months or 14 months has highlighted is how important our people's well-being is. How many people actually are going to the pub at 10 o'clock at night time just to get to speak to another human being, and how much loneliness is a real, like there's a huge amount of learning. So not everything has to be negative of what happened, even though a lot of it is for the last 14 months. But we have huge positive changes, I think, with regard to income standards, employment rights. The Tánaiste is very, very concerned about some of those and how some of our people were treated over the last 12 to 14 months, how childcare is addressed, you know, how access to housing is addressed. There's huge learnings. And I think particularly with regard to the well-being and the interaction of our Irish citizens, so, you know, should be something that we're all really, really conscious and cognizant of.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you. And it's great to get an insight into those early stages around the decision-making table and how fast you all acted. You deserve great credit. We're going to move on to our next theme, which is around remote working and learning. prior to the pandemic, there was an increase in the number of people opting to work remotely. And it's something that I'm mainly familiar with from my colleague in Dublin West, Senator Emer Curry, because she's been a great champion of this. And she's spoken about it since the moment I met her. So I'm aware of it from her. But prior to that, I wouldn't have been very aware, because from my own professional background, it's not hugely an option for us. So Fine Gael have always really supported the National Broadband Scheme from the beginning. Remote working provides people with an opportunity to spend less time commuting, more time with their friends and families, and more time in their communities. And we really seen that sense of community during COVID, where people rallied together and, helped out their more vulnerable neighbours and checked in with each other and delivered food and so on. So I think people have got a huge appreciation for their communities after this. I'm going to just go to you, if that's okay, Minister Harris, and looking at the National Broadband Scheme and the opportunities that that's going to provide. I'm thinking, I'm originally from Ardran, County Donegal, which is a rural part of the country, and where my parents live, they have fantastic broadband access. So there will be huge opportunities for people to work remotely from different locations. We might not be exactly where we want to be in terms of access, but how do you see the future for your department in terms of remote learning? I'm just thinking back in my own college days, there's people who would have went back to teacher training as mature students with young children and travelled from counties such as Laois. And then there were people like myself who enjoyed living on campus. So, going forward, what sort of balance are we going to strike there in terms of remote learning for that would be, under your department, I suppose?
Well, I think, Siobhan, the first thing we must say out of Fine Gael Ard Fheis is it's very interesting how we don't hear any of our political opponents giving out about the National Broadband Plan now. All they're giving out about is how fast we can roll the plan out. And I think Richard Bruton deserves massive credit for the leadership, the guts and the conviction he showed in getting this over the line. And don't ever let any of our political opponents airbrush it. When they all ask parliamentary questions about when the National Broadband Plan is coming to their village and town, most of them opposed the National Broadband Plan, which is, that irony is not lost to me. And this is a party conference, so it's worth making that point. On the issue of how we can use the technology and the lessons of learning, the lessons of the pandemic for learning, you're entirely right. We have to stop talking about students in third level as though they're all just school leavers. We need to get our school leaving students back to college, right? They want the campus experience. They deserve the campus experience. Going to colleges more than just looking down a Zoom camera. But I have met hundreds upon hundreds of people across the country virtually who are mature students, and they're engaged in lifelong learning, and they can't just pack the bags and head off to college for 3 or 4 years. Maybe they have children, maybe they've caring responsibilities for a parent, they have a mortgage, they have a job. They want to be able to access lifelong learning, third level education, whether it's a degree or a master's or a diploma, in a flexible way. And one of the exciting things about the blended learning model we've seen is there are people today in third level education who wouldn't have previously been able to access it. So I met a group from the Longford Women's Link, where they were doing their degree, middle-aged women doing their degrees remotely whilst working, doing a degree in Maynooth from rural Longford. And we need to see much, much more of that. So our message in the work of my department and the work of Fine Gael in government is about how we can bring further and higher education into your community. The role of the technological universities is a part of this. Not all roads must lead to Dublin if you want to go to a university, and we're making huge progress on that. And then the idea of being able to, after a day's work, come home and turn on the computer and actually do a module is going to transform lives, transform our economy, and I think really increase participation rates in lifelong learning in Ireland.
Thanks. And I see Minister Coveney, you're indicating there to come in and speak.
Yeah, I just wanted to make the point that a lot of people before the pandemic were somewhat skeptical about working from home, whether it was possible, whether we could get the numbers of people working from home that became an essential part of living in Ireland during the pandemic, when people had to work from home and find a way to do it. And so, yes, the National Broadband Scheme opens up a real new opportunity to live on the basis of quality of life and on the basis of where people want to live, as opposed to where you have to live for work. And the 2040 plan for Ireland is a Fine Gael plan. The national planning framework was put together under a Fine Gael government. And this is about dramatically changing actually how we live, how we move around, moving away from the dominance of Dublin and the East Coast to improve the quality of life in Dublin and the East Coast, but also to spread the opportunity and population growth to other parts of the country. And the National Broadband Scheme gives us an infrastructure to do that. So whether you're living in Allihies at the end of the Beara Peninsula, or whether you're living in Ballsbridge, you should be able to get the same broadband speeds into your home office. And this is going to be a big part of rural transformation in Ireland, because many people in politics see protecting rural Ireland as trying to keep things as they are. What Fine Gael is saying is we can transform rural Ireland, change it for the better through technology, better infrastructure, and of course, support the quality of life issues that allow people to live in a much more sustainable way. So, you know, I think that the ambition that we have, and this idea that Fine Gael is a party of the future in terms of trying to design a more modern, sustainable way of living, is facilitated to a great extent by the lessons from COVID. And there are serious lessons to learn from COVID in terms of the pace of change that can be delivered when we have to do it in an emergency. And of course, the ambition around a broadband rollout that really can breathe life into rural parts of Ireland where people want to live, but haven't been able to work from because of the lack of infrastructure there for them. So as Simon says, you know, Richard Bruton deserves incredible recognition for the level of ambition and the determination that he had to drive through a policy that many people objected to, but now everybody can't see happen quick enough.
Yeah, absolutely. We're actually beginning to run out of time, and I know we could stay on here and talk for an awful lot longer, but it's almost time for the leader's address. I'd like to just take this opportunity to thank you all, thank Minister Coveney, Minister Harris, Minister Donoghue and Senator Doherty. And thank you on behalf of myself for all your fantastic work during the pandemic and for leading us into the future following on from this. So Guramila Mahagav, and thank you to everyone who tuned into this session, and hopefully we'll all see you back at a real Ardesh very soon in the future. Guramila Mahagav.
Good evening, members. You are very welcome to this, the highlight of Ardesh 2021, our leader's speech. I am standing here this evening in the Simmons Court Pavilion, where as a Fine Gael family, we have attended many counts together, tallied together and celebrated many political highs. It is a great privilege for me to stand here. I am very honoured to serve in the 26th Seanad as a nominee of our party leader. I am the Seanad spokesperson on children, disability, equality, integration and privacy rights. My focus is on the constituency of Dublin South Central, bringing the Fine Gael message of equality of opportunity to the constituents there. We are the party of the new social contract, delivering on our deep-rooted values of creating a just society. On the ground, I see our values in action through school meals, family supports and community programmes. I have had the privilege through my own Seanad work to speak out for children, families and individuals with disabilities. And I'm also on the Oireachtas Joint Committee for Children, and also on the Committee for Housing, Local Government and Heritage. I am proud of our party's supports and stance as I recently advocated for bringing an end to period poverty, for miscarriage leave, for equality for children born via surrogacy, for young people striving to rebuild what was lost to them during the pandemic, and supporting family carers. I've been very much involved with the mother and baby home survivors, and much of my time is spent listening carefully to their testimonies, their experiences, their views and needs, ensuring our Fine Gael compassion is felt in our government's response. Through my daily work, I see at first hand that we are the party supporting families. We established the First Five initiative in the care of the child. We introduced free GP care for children under 6. We gave a second free preschool year. We launched Project 2040 that invests in early years capital infrastructure, and we put in place paternity leave. We are the party supporting women and their right to bodily integrity and autonomy. We are the party supporting diversity, whether by marriage equality and inclusion, and supporting actions against racism. We are the party supporting children with disabilities, with a minister dedicated to ensuring a holistic, multidisciplinary care at their place of education. And I work closely with Minister Josepha Madigan, delivering on the additional ASD classes. At this point, I would like to welcome our RTE viewers to this, the highlight of Ard Fheis 2021, our leader's address. I think it was Aristotle who is supposed to have said, "We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence then is not an act, but a habit." And I am proud to be a member of a party who has made a habit of excellence in leadership, in the service of our country, through the lens of our Fine Gael values: equality of opportunity, enterprise and reward, security, integrity and hope. When the pandemic struck, Ireland was riding high with a strong economy and rising incomes, having completed 9 successful years under a Fine Gael-led government. When the then Taoiseach, Leo Varadkar, walked down those steps in Washington and announced the awful news of the arrival of the coronavirus in Ireland, we all feared the worst. But, as is our habit, when our country needs us, Fine Gael led our country calmly through those dark days with decisiveness. Our Fine Gael colleagues in Cabinet made decisions that supported our health service, supported families, supported our communities and our economy. They ensured that the catastrophic scenes of other countries didn't happen here. We knew when our party leader walked down the steps at government buildings to deliver the latest news, the plan and the truth of what we were facing, we knew we were secure under his decisive, strong leadership. We would continue our Fine Gael habit to deliver for Ireland, as we continue to do so now under the fantastic leadership of our party president and Tánaiste, Leo Varadkar.
Thank you, Mary, and good evening. Tonight I want to speak to you about my vision, Fine Gael's vision, for Ireland's future in the second century of our independence. A vision for our future post-pandemic, how we can build a brighter, better, more modern, more inclusive country in the years ahead. A vision that is guided by our values as a party: equality of opportunity, rewarding work, supporting enterprise, providing security, and above all, offering hope. As a party, one of Fine Gael's core beliefs is in the social market economy. It's the right model for Ireland to follow. It's the philosophy of the European centrist and Christian democratic family to which we belong. The belief in a social market economy is grounded in the knowledge that a market economy is the best way to generate employment, resources and wealth, alongside the understanding that we need a strong state to achieve our social objectives, an active state, a state that cares. As a nation, we have endured 15 extremely difficult months. Together we battled COVID-19. Together we suffered. And together we prevailed. We remember those who were lost, more than 7,000 people north and south, families and friends who still mourn, individuals with stories we will never forget. And we commit, in their memory, to build a better Ireland that is worthy of them. Tá tionchar mór ag an bandé maring ar fad. Tá ionsaí déanta ag an coronavirus ar mearachláinte agus ar a chláinte is a ciúil. Agus tá fullingthe ag an túfás a going ar go leor bailí agsúla. Thug misneach a bhí agaibh agus an teachtaníir a bhí ionmh cúnamh dúntacht tríd an tréimhse uafásach seo. Inis tá ábhar misní a going arís. I believe our response to the pandemic was Ireland at its very best. We learned that we can achieve the impossible when we work together for a common cause, as a team of 5 million. So let's make this the new normal. Having led Ireland through the financial crisis, Brexit and the pandemic, and as we celebrate a century of nationhood, let's embark on a new mission. A mission to build a just society, one in which everyone has the opportunity to grow and prosper, to get a good education, to find a job and get promoted, to own a home, to raise a family, to build a successful business, to be looked after when we're sick, and to grow old in security and dignity. The pandemic has caused us to reevaluate what really matters to us the most. The value of community, solidarity, care, our natural environment, our personal health, our home, our family and friends. We've redefined what we mean by essential workers, not just nurses and doctors, Gardaí and paramedics, but also supermarket workers, drivers, cleaners, and people working in food production and service. So I believe a legacy of the pandemic must be better pay, terms and conditions for all workers, public and private sector. Fine Gael will take the lead on this through the introduction of statutory sick pay, the move to a living wage, and access to an occupational pension for all employees to supplement their state pension. Reforming our social welfare system to provide a better safety net initially for those who lose their jobs or have to take time out to care for others. When it comes to the workplace, I don't believe that we should return to the old normal, the way things were. We need a new normal in which people are facilitated to work from home or from a hub near to where they live. It should be all about choice. I don't think anyone now doubts our decision to invest in the National Broadband Plan, which will bring fibre to hundreds of thousands of homes, farms, schools and businesses all across Ireland. Indeed, that's now well underway. Combined with remote working, we have a once-in-a-generation opportunity to transform rural Ireland for the better. And Fine Gael will make sure that we seize that opportunity. I believe the future of work must be more family-friendly. Women must have equal opportunities to men when it comes to pay and promotion, and the gender pay gap must be closed. Owning our own home is in the DNA of us as a people, but this dream is out of reach for far too many. This dream, this promise, must again become a reality. We must renew the social contract and make owning our own home a fundamental part of it. So tonight I want to set a target of getting back to 70% home ownership by the end of the decade. This will require getting up to 40,000 new homes built every year, double where we are now. This will be done through public and private investment because we need both. And Fine Gael as a party will champion the building of new communities and new homes, social, shared ownership, cost rental, student accommodation, homes to rent, and above all, homes to buy. Housing is a human right, but it means nothing just to say it, fight for it or write it into law. You have to mean it and make it happen. This means voting for new housing, not against it. It means new and stronger protections for renters. It means encouraging investment, not chasing it away. And it means helping first-time buyers to get a deposit and a mortgage they can afford. That is what Fine Gael does. Others will talk, we will build, and we will protect. Delegates, the pandemic has reminded us of the power and beauty of our environment. When I became Taoiseach, I said it was our ambition to take Ireland from being a laggard to a leader in climate action. With the changes we're making, like the new climate law passed by the Dáil earlier this week, we are now well on our way, putting the environment, biodiversity and sustainability at the heart of what we do. I want to see our towns and cities become more livable and people-friendly. I want to protect the family farm model and farm incomes by working with our farmers to reduce the impact of intensive agriculture on our soil, climate and water. In urban areas, let's make the idea of a 15-minute city or town a reality, with all the services that you need within a 15-minute walk or bike ride. During the pandemic, we saw just how good our health service can be. Unlike many other countries, we did not run out of hospital beds, oxygen or ventilators. Our testing and tracing system worked well, and our vaccine programme has been a huge success. Systems were changed and reforms were made quickly. And we need to keep up this speed and efficiency to take people off waiting lists, to provide a better service and improve patient outcomes. So I believe the additional staff and resources and billions in extra funding that we provided to the health service to respond to the emergency should be retained and redeployed within the health system. We must implement the Sláinte Care promise of affordable healthcare for all by reducing further out-of-pocket expenses for medicines and hospital charges and expanding medical card eligibility. Let's make it our mission to build a public health service that can be ranked among the best in Europe by the end of this decade. I know that the pandemic has been hugely difficult for young people. They've had their lives, relationships, and education disrupted. Education from preschool to postgrad is the great leveller, a giver of opportunity, and a driver for equality. Investment in education is an investment in the better future we need to build. A just society, of course, can only be built on the solid foundations of a growing and competitive economy. Fine Gael is, and always has been, the party you can trust to keep our economy growing, to create new jobs, and to manage the public finance as well. We believe in backing business and supporting enterprise, particularly our small and medium enterprises all over the country, which provide the majority of employment in the state. So the financial supports introduced in the pandemic will remain in place for so long as they are needed, so that every business gets a fighting chance to recover and grow. We will also take special care for the sectors hit hardest and longest, like tourism, hospitality, aviation, media, entertainment and the arts. And we repeat our commitment that there will be no increases in income tax by stealth or by design, because we believe in rewarding work through better pay and fairer taxes. Delegates, our prosperity is built on the goods and services that we produce and sell to the world. That's why we believe in seeking out foreign direct investment and welcoming free trade to Ireland. It's why we stand by our sovereign right to set our own tax rates, a crucial tool for small countries to compete, and why we believe that Ireland's place is at the heart of the European Union, as founder members of the single market in the Eurozone. We are proud to call ourselves Europeans. As a government, we have set the ambition of restoring all of the jobs that have been lost due to the pandemic, and to have 2.5 million people at work in Ireland by 2024, a new record. This will require a huge expansion of higher and further education, skills development, lifelong learning and apprenticeships, as we prepare our young and older people for the jobs of tomorrow. Fine Gael will see this as done. After the pandemic, we will never go back to the old way of doing things. We showed the world what we could achieve in the worst of circumstances, and we showed each other what we can be when we're at our best. We proved that politics can work and that we can achieve things once thought impossible. So in the years ahead, this must be our guiding light and inspiration as we build a better future for all. Thank you very much, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Tánaiste. We've had an extraordinary week together of debate and engagement. We have passionately debated our shared future together. We advocated for homes and our housing policies. We explored the challenges and opportunities facing agriculture. We called for a fairer Ireland, caring for all. We examined justice and equality in a rapidly changing world. We explored remote working and how, in the wake of the pandemic, we can maximise the opportunities for a more balanced development. We want to reopen with confidence, supporting workers and supporting businesses. Young Fine Gael had an exciting debate on building a republic of opportunity. We heard the valued experiences of our councillors. We had an opportunity to see the extraordinary work of the Fine Gael Women's Network and the Fine Gael Intercultural Group. We put together a short video just to give you a flavour of our week so that you can see it for yourself. And here it is.
The theme of this conference is the future, an opportunity for us to discuss the Ireland that we, the Fine Gael team, want to build when the pandemic is over.
Fine Gael is the party of constitutional democracy and social justice.
Fine Gael, as a party, has always been a party that prides itself on trying to think ahead in a way that's generous, in a way that's modern, in a way that reaches out.
So we are training 800 advisors to be able to spot and signpost support to farmers who are showing signs of distress.
I believe Fine Gael is the most liberal and progressive political party in Ireland.
We need women, we need minority groups, we need diversity within our party now more than ever.
For me, the game changed in 2017 when Fine Gael launched the Rural Department and the Rural Regeneration Strategy.
That singer now, you don't hear me singing. Not a sound you want to hear.
Fine Gael is the party responsible for the signing of the National Broadband Contract.
And for me, it is that lesson of the value of being ready for when the unknown happens.
And it's our job as a political party, our job as a political movement, to become the party that puts forward big ideas.
The Land Development Agency, which will be a key state actor coming into the marketplace, delivering social, affordable and cost rental homes at scale for all our citizens.
So, Tánaiste, it has really been a very different Ard Fheis, this idea of having a virtual Ard Fheis, and yet we've really experienced great engagement throughout the week.
And gone well. I think we've had more people attending virtually than we used to have in person, so hopefully next time we'll do it hybrid and have even more.
Absolutely, I think that'd be a great way forward. But so we have our wall. We're going to be joined by some of our delegates here, and perhaps they could give the camera a wave. Give everyone a wave, and that's great. So as we have people, some of our delegates are going to ask a number of questions. And the first question, I believe, is going to be on housing.
Tánaiste, I'm Thelma. I'm originally from Laois and I'm renting in Dublin. I was encouraged to hear you say that housing is a human right. I'm someone who, while renting, is also trying to save to be able to afford my own home. I'd like to know how this right can become a reality for people like me who aspire to own our own homes but simply can't afford it.
Well, thanks, Thelma, for the question. Thanks so much. And as I said earlier, I think it's very much in the DNA of Irish people that we want to own our own home, a place to live, but also the security that gives people, and even the idea of being able to pass it on to family members when we pass on, and that's something that we want to vindicate as a right. Other parties talk about housing a lot, maybe not so much about home ownership, and we believe we need to talk about both because they go together. In terms of things we've done already, you'll know that we have the Help to Buy scheme, which has helped loads of first-time buyers to get a deposit, the Rebuilding Ireland home loan to help with mortgages, and also we've seen a big increase in the number of new homes being built from only 5,000 or so a few years ago to 20,000 now. But it's nowhere near enough. We've a lot more that we're going to have to do in the period ahead. And it's never simple, it is complex. It starts with making sure we have enough apprentices trained, and Simon Harris is taking the lead on that. We need to have enough lands owned and serviced, and that means Irish Water getting involved and building roads and other connections as well. It also means making sure the planning system works properly and that houses can actually get through the planning process, and also that builders of all sizes can get adequate finance. And it's only really by doing all of those things that we can get the supply that we need to make sure that many more people are able to buy their first home or upgrade or downsize if they need to in the couple of years ahead. One big change we're making, it's been slow coming, but it is coming, is the Land Development Agency, a new semi-state essentially, the IDA, if you like, for housing. And that new body established at the moment is going to get more involved in the housing market, the state actually building more houses. And in Dublin and Cork, for example, it's going to be a mix. Social housing, which we need and need a lot more of, but also a lot of affordable housing as well, which is private housing that people can buy through a shared ownership model. And they're the things we're going to drive forward over the next 3 years.
That's really good. And it is a lot of moving parts, as you say, and I think that is. And of course, the Land Development Agency was founded under ourselves, holding that ministry as the legislation now goes through. And I believe we have another question now on tax. Do we have Michael?
Hello, Tánaiste. My name is Michael Paul Murta. I'm a married father of 2. I'm 42 years old. And I've worked in the Cork City Fire Brigade for the last 22 years. In 2006, I took out a sizable mortgage at the time of over €300,000 to buy a home, a 2-bedroom house, which I now live in with my family, happily. I represent a huge cohort of ordinary working people, sometimes referred to as the squeezed middle, where we seem to pay for everything and get very little in return. When we're recruited initially, we start in a lower tax bracket, and after a few years, we break into a higher tax bracket. Like many other jobs, mine is considered a good one, and my wage is average. I'm hardworking and ambitious in that I want to do well for myself, my family, and I want to do my best for the country. But if I choose to work extra hours or get a pay rise or a promotion, I lose half of what I earn before I even start on tax. My question is, how can we, our team, Fine Gael, make our tax system fairer so that it rewards hardworking people like myself instead of penalising us? Thank you.
Thanks, Emil, and congratulations on your recent co-option to Cork County Council. Hope you enjoy being a councillor. It's not the easiest job, but one that's very rewarding. If you look at things in the round, Ireland is not a high tax country. We're not a high tax economy. But that isn't true when it comes to income tax. Actually, when it comes to income tax, our top tax rate is the 4th highest in the developed world. So we are a high tax economy for a lot of people. And that's not rich people. You know, that kicks in below 40,000 for a single person. And it means that any extra money that you earn, a bonus, a pay increase, an increment, a bit of overtime, you'll lose more than that, more than half of that in income tax, PRSI and USC. And we very much believe that is unfair, particularly on middle income earners. And if you don't increase the bands every year, more and more people fall into that higher tax net, and more people have to pay more of their income at that higher rate. And that's why we secured in the programme for government a commitment to index income tax bands, so that wouldn't happen. Now, some people say that's a tax cut. I don't accept that. What we say is that is avoiding further tax increases, because it's a stealth tax not to widen those bands. And that's the commitment that we achieved in the programme for government. And it's not just fairness, it also makes economic sense, because a lot of the future is going to be about the battle for talent. We're going to have to compete internationally for talent to get people who've got really good qualifications, can command high incomes, talented people to base themselves in Ireland and not remote work from other parts of the world. And just like high corporate taxes mean less revenue, when income taxes are too high, it can mean less revenue too. And that's why we're committed to making sure that we've no income tax increases, either by stealth or by design, during the period of this government.
That's great. Thank you, Tánaiste. And of course, you at home can join us and join our conversation using hashtag FGAF21. We'll now move on to a question about the living wage.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Tánaiste. My name is John Phillips. I'm from the Cork East constituency. Tánaiste, as you have said, the events of the last 18 months have really shown us that we need to reevaluate what's important to us and to redefine what we mean by a frontline worker. How do you feel the living wage will bring changes to people in essential services?
I think the whole idea of a living wage is that somebody's hourly rate should be enough for them to get by, to have a minimum standard of living. And there are different ways of calculating it. Some people do it based on a basket of goods and services, others based on the percentage of an average income or medium income. And we have to work out exactly how to do that for Ireland. But generally what it means is that people get a decent wage for a decent day's pay or a decent day's work. And we know from the pandemic that so many of the people who we asked to continue to go to work every day, people in supermarkets, people who work in transport, drivers, cleaners, people who work generally in low-paid jobs, often are in very low incomes. And that's something that we want to change. We have a good record, I believe, as a party in this regard. In the last 10 years, we've increased the minimum wage 7 times. Increased it by 25%. It's the 6th highest now, I think, in the developed world. So people know we're sincere about this. Others talk, we act. But it isn't enough. And what we'd like to do over the next couple of years, certainly during the period of this government, is to move towards this living wage concept. And that makes sense. It means people will have more money in their pockets. It also makes sense as well because it might mean that they're less reliant on financial supports and subsidies from the state. So it can actually work that way too. And that's something we're committed to. We talk about rewarding work. Rewarding work must mean decent wages and better wages.
And indeed, after the economic crash, we were the first people to move as quickly as we could to reverse any reduction in the minimum wage. So I think we really have, you're absolutely right, we have a great and really strong track record at it. And now we move on to the initiative and the great initiatives of your own department in remote working. And we have a question on remote working.
Hello, I'm Orla Kelly from Carlow Kilkenny constituency. Tánaiste, Díagwich, and hello to everyone. We've all had a really difficult year, but there have been some things that we've learned. We've learned a much better way of working. This part remote working and being able to work from home means that there is a much better work-life balance, less commuting. It's a really good incentive for local communities. And it's also been really good for the environment. So now what we have going forward is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to change the way we work in the future of Ireland. And I know this week and next, a lot of people are going to be going back into the office, and maybe some people even miss that. But I think most of us would really like the opportunity to be able to continue to have a flexible workplace, to continue to be able to work remotely when we choose to. And I'd just like to ask, how can we ensure that that is the case going forward?
Hi, Orla, and Dios Margaret. I think there's a real opportunity here because of the pandemic. You know, if we'd planned to move to remote working or people working from hubs or blended working, which I think is what most people want, a mix of the 2 or 3, if we planned to do that, we probably would have taken 10 years trying to make it happen. Because of the pandemic, it happened almost overnight. I know it's been a mixed experience for people living in a small apartment, one person working from the main room, the other from the bedroom. It's not such a pleasant experience. For others who maybe have better facilities at home, it has been a very positive one. More time with family, less commuting, reduced greenhouse gas emissions from transport, lots of benefits for society, more money being spent in rural areas and small towns and villages, which is really important too. And what I fear is that if we do nothing, we'll just drift back to our old habits and drift back to the old normal. And I want to make sure that doesn't happen. So we're asking people to begin the conversation, employers and employees talking together about what arrangements we can have for the future. My department is going to launch a whole campaign around this, encouraging employers and employees to have this conversation. It should be about choice. But obviously the work has to be done and business needs have to be met, but we believe we can find a happy medium. So that's a campaign we're going to run very shortly. In addition to that, led by Minister Donoghue, there's going to be a package in the next budget to encourage remote working. And we're also going to bring in a new law called the right to remote working. That's not a right to demand remote working, but it is the right to request it. Your employer will have to take your request seriously, give a good reason as to why they refuse it if they do, and that can be challenged in the WRC if you didn't get a fair hearing. And that's all about this whole new world of work that we want. There's also, of course, the new guidelines on the right to disconnect, because we don't want to turn our homes into workplaces. We want people to be able to switch off when they need to. And also we're setting a target in the public service for remote working. And the Department of Public Expenditure under Minister McGrath is taking the lead on that, on developing guidelines for civil and public servants. So a huge opportunity, and I think a big opportunity as well for people with disabilities, for example, to perhaps get jobs that they couldn't get before, or for people who have caring responsibilities, rather than giving up their jobs and the chance of promotion and advancement, maybe being able to work from home for a while and retain that possibility.
Yeah, and I think that captures it very much. So we have women, carers, and particularly, and that has come through in the Disability Matters Committee, of remote working is a really great opportunity. And I'm really grateful for your initiative. You seized upon the opportunity of the change of culture for remote working to hold a public consultation and then launch the strategy, which has been really great and very well received, I think. So we really look forward to that. And I suppose attendant to that is the whole area of childcare and the changes there. So we have Alice with a question on childcare.
Hello everybody, and hello Tánaiste. Tánaiste, you said earlier this evening that the future of work must be more family friendly and that women should have equal opportunities. As a member of Fine Gael Women's Network, I very much welcome that statement. Unfortunately though, I think that the high cost of childcare is still a major factor for families when they're making those decisions around work and family care. So I'm wondering, what steps can we take to ensure that this is not the case and to reduce the cost of childcare while still giving families choice and a high quality service? And I suppose I'm thinking particularly too of parents who might have a child with additional needs. Gaurav Mahagat.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks very much. I think there can be no doubt that the cost of childcare in Ireland is very high relative to our peers, and that's not just a negative impact on the household budget, it's also bad economically too, because it shuts people out of the workforce, people often with very good skills who we need to stay in the workforce. So it's an area that we've been involved in for a long time, I think, as a party. We shouldn't forget what we have done, working with Minister Zapone and the Labour Party before that, bringing in things like additional parental leave, paternity benefit, that second year of preschool, which I think people really value. That's a system that's worked very well, and it's not just about childcare, of course, it's early childhood education as well, and the best investments in education are often the ones made in the early years, and of course the National Childcare Scheme, which provides subsidies, particularly for people on lower incomes, but for the vast majority of people it's a very high cost, the same as paying the rent or the mortgage all over again every month, and we have to fix that. At the moment, the childcare sector receives a lot of government supports through the wage subsidy scheme in particular and through other funding models. But what we haven't seen yet really is any sort of cap on fees or reduction in fees. And I think that's what we need to move towards. That's going to require an engagement with the sector. It's also a sector where we need to make sure that people are paid better and their skills are protected. So a lot of work to do in this area, but certainly one that the government wants to make meaningful progress on in the years ahead. And I know with Mary's leadership on those issues in the Senate, we have a very good team working on that.
And I think a lot of our values are very much reflected in the programme for government and will be delivered upon, but it's a very much Fine Gael. And if this is a good moment for me to give a plug for the Policy Lab and the recent Care of the Child Policy Kitchen, which has been a fantastic success of the public engaging with Fine Gael and us listening to providers and parents in the whole area of childcare and where that might go. We'll now go to Councillor John Hegarty, and he is going to ask us a question, I believe, on education.
Good evening, everybody. Good evening, Tánaiste. My name is John Hegarty. I'm a councillor in Wexford and principal of Wexford CBS Secondary School. Recently, Tánaiste, you said you believed that education could help to provide greater opportunity. Unfortunately, for many students, the lockdowns have seen them regress quite a lot. What do you think we need to do so that no matter what the student's background, they can fulfill their potential and catch up on the missed learning and development? Thank you, Tánaiste.
Hi, John. Thanks very much, and great to see you coming in from Wexford. I think there can be no doubt that the pandemic has affected people differently and unequally, and that's true of children too. And the most disadvantaged kids, the ones with the greatest educational needs, have probably suffered the most in terms of the pandemic, maybe less able, for example, to go online. In many cases, not the same amount of parental support back home. And that's a real worry because while a year or a few months in the life of somebody in their 40s or 50s mightn't be a big thing, every month, every week counts in the development of a child. And that's why as a government, working with Minister Foley, we're trying to put together a package essentially that will provide for summer provision, for summer learning, for children who need it to be able to catch up. But I don't think it can stop just there, because a couple of weeks extra tuition or some classes over the summer, that's not going to be enough for the time that's lost. So we need to make sure that we embed something medium or longer term to make sure that those children who lost out on their education as a consequence of the pandemic are able to make that recovery and catch up for that lost time. And that's what we're working on at the moment, and hopefully we'll have more information on that before the summer recess. And also a lot of work being done on a different level by Minister Harris in making sure that we have a return to the campus in September, October. Feel really bad for a lot of college students, particularly first years, who haven't had a normal fun college experience, who've been studying from their bedroom or a box room, and that must be soul destroying. And we really want to make sure that they're mainly on campus in September, October, not mainly at home, which is the current place now. And we have, as a party, managed to bring about a situation whereby there are more people in higher education than ever before, and from more diverse and non-traditional backgrounds than ever before. And that's something we should be proud of, I believe, as a party, but something we need to build on.
Yeah, very much so, very much so. There's been huge strides forward in that. And there we end our Ardèche. We would normally end with your speech and riotous applause. So it is a very different ending. But thank you very much, Tánaiste, and thank you very much, members. It really has been a great week of engagement and a great coming together while we were staying apart, to coin a phrase. But I really look forward to us seeing each other again in person in the very near future. So slán agus Banacliv.